If you know, if you've been coming to us for a few times now, that we've been going through the series called Vision. So you've been seeing that video, you've been seeing the slides, and this is kind of part of our English service launch. And what we've been doing is we've been looking at the early church, and we've been looking at what they believed, and that the hope is that their vision would encourage us to live out our faith passionately and purposefully, right, as we kind of look at what the early church believed and what they did. And so during our first two sermons, we saw that this whole world was turned upside down, right, by this small group of peasants and fishermen and lay people. People with no political power, people with no money at all. Like how? How did they turn the world upside down? And we saw that two things, right? They believed in the objective historical claims of Christianity. And because they believed that, they were empowered by the Holy Spirit to live it out, their faith in a very intentional way that basically enabled them to experience God very differently from what they're used to, right? And they end up becoming the reflection of who God's glory is to their neighbors and to their friends. So our question for this afternoon then is, well, how do we know that what they experience and what we experience is not a fleeting emotion? Like, how do we know that what they believe and what we believe is actually true, rather than just, hey, I just feel like God is speaking to me? Right? How do we know this is real? How do we know that it's not an emotion, but a lasting conviction? Right? How do we know that? Like, how do we know that it's here to stay, rather than, oh, I just felt like somebody just made me very, like, the praise was so good, and I just felt moved by God, right? Rather than a long-lasting conviction of ours. That's what we're going to look at today, right? We're going to look at, well, what are the marks of a true Christian as we study the early church? Like, what does it mean to be a Christian, and what did Christians actually do, right? Someone who says they are a follower of Christ, what does that look like? So we're going to be in Acts chapter 2 today, verse 42 to 47. If you can actually stand, if you're able to kind of join me, we're going to read our verse for today together. Acts 2, 42 to 47. And it reads, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayer. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." That is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. All right. So what do we see here, right? In Acts chapter 2, we actually see marks of somebody who says, I'm a Christian, right? What does a Christ follower actually look like? Okay? And we see that, what does it mean for someone who says, hey, I believed in the objective historical claims of Christianity, and I experienced God in my life in such a different way that now I have the Holy Spirit living in me. So what does that look like? Like, what does a Christian look like? And what we see here in Acts chapter 2 and what we just read is a radically different way of living. Completely different way of living than what we're so used to. And let me summarize to you, right? Chapter 2, here's a summary. This is what they did. This is what it means to be a Christian, or the early Christians. That Christians constantly came together to learn, love, and worship, which became so attractive to the world because they were praising Jesus Christ. Okay? And in fact, these 4 things are going to be our 4 points for today's sermon. The summary of Acts chapter 2, what Christians were doing in the early church, and what we need to kind of envision in our church and in our lives. All right, so Christians constantly came together to learn, to love, and to worship, which became so attractive to the world because they were praising Jesus Christ. Let's take a look at the first one. First thing we see is in verse 46, right? That Christians constantly came together in the early church. Like, they constantly came together. Verse 46 reads, "And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes." Did you catch that? It doesn't say on Sunday they were getting together. It says day by day. You know what that means? that means every single day, the Christians would get together and they would worship together and they would go back home and then they would still continue to worship together. They continue to hang out together. They continue to praise Christ at the temple as well as at home. And as if regular life and everything else was an interruption of them worshiping God, right? They were doing this day by day. And you know what's interesting? What's interesting is as we begin to launch our Sunday worship service, right? As we begin to kind of begin this process here, like I've had to invite people to come, right? I had to say, hey, come join us on Sunday. Hey, come join us on Friday. Hey, come join us for dinner, right? Hey, come serve with us. Can you please just put God first, right? And I'm racking my brain, and every week I'm thinking about like, how can I make Sunday more interesting? How can I make the sermons more interesting? And in different ways and different forms, I try to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But what's interesting is if you look at the early church, particularly the book of Acts, you don't actually see the apostles pleading with anybody coming, like, do you? Right? You don't actually see them asking anyone to show up to the temple to join. Why? Do you know why? Because they couldn't stop them. Like they wanted to meet together. They wanted to get together. And they did it day by day. Like even if the apostles tried to say, hey, y'all, stop hanging out. Please stop hanging out. Like the apostles couldn't stop them because they wanted to get together. Okay? So even though there's nothing wrong with having to encourage people and to challenge people to come on Sundays or Fridays, whatnot. But the thing is, what's interesting is the apostles didn't have to say, like, hey, could you come join us on Sundays in the temples? Like, can you please come check us out, right? Because the people wanted to come. And that is a sign of life in the church, right? That is a mark of a Christian, right? Someone who's been touched by the gospel, right? That is a sign of life, right? It's someone who says, hey, you don't have to tell me to get together. Like, I want to be here, right? You don't have to guilt me to come to church. It's my delight. It's my pleasure to be here, right? Like, as a Christian, we're not getting together because of some sort of command or duty, like someone's making us do this, but we come as a response of their heart and their lives being transformed, right? That they have found new life in their faith. They have found new life in God working in them. Right, so that's life in the church, and that's what a growing church is going to look like. When the people in the church says, hey, you don't have to tell me to come. I want to be here. I want to spend time with these people. So post-check, okay? Like post-check. Right? Like is this life in you? Like, do you have that desire at least, even a little bit? Is it even beating a little bit? Right? Is there at least some desire? Like, hey, I kind of do want to hang out, and when I'm not here, yeah, like I'm busy, but I kind of did want to hang out. Like, is that in you? Right? Is it in you at all? Is there any sign of life? Because Christians in the early church, they wanted to get together. They wanted to hang out with one another, right? They wanted to come together to worship God, is what we see. The second thing we see is that the Christians in the early church, they were devoted to learning, loving, and worshiping. Okay, they were devoted. Verse 42. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Okay, now there's a lot in this verse that I can go over. Like I could do like a 4-part sermon on this verse alone, okay? We're not going to do that, and we don't have the time because I've been told I can't go over time anyways. So here's a quick overview, okay? Four things that the early Christians did. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. You see that already, right? In other words, they were devoted to learning, right? The apostles' teaching wasn't just referring to the Old Testament or like the old part of the Bible, right? It's referring to just how Christ was being lived out, right? That they saw what Jesus was doing because it was still relevant. He's only died like a few months ago, right? So still fairly relevant. And so they were learning from the life of Jesus. And next week, we're going to go deeper in this verse alone. So I'm just going to end it there. Second thing we see them do is they devoted themselves to the fellowship, right? To the fellowship. Now, when we use the word fellowship, I think often we kind of mean it as like hang out, right? Like fellowship. Let's like Christians use this all the time. Let's fellowship together. We are fellowshipping. And somehow we use it as let's just hang out. Let's hang out socially. But that's not what this verse is saying, right? That we think they're saying they're just hanging out, but that's not what it's saying here. Because notice that the word is saying that they were devoted to the fellowship. You see the word the, right? Scholars say that makes a big difference when you add the fellowship, right? Rather than just fellowship, right? When they get together, they didn't see themselves as just hanging out as a group, but they actually saw themselves as a part of something greater. They're committed to a great bigger purpose, right? They're part of the fellowship. They're committed to a purpose. So when they got together, they were actually very intentional, right? It wasn't just let's get together just to hang out, but they were committed to the fellowship, right? And they were intentional in being open with one another. They were intentional in being honest with each other. They were intentional in sharing their struggles of their sins as well as their victories. I heard this past Friday, I couldn't make it, but I heard it was a really good time of sharing. People who were there, nice, small, cozy group. So figured I should probably not show up more often because it was probably better without me, right? But it was a nice, cozy group that people were getting together and they were sharing and they're kind of sharing life together. I think that was good. Right? And they were able to do that in ways that they couldn't do it with other people. Like they could be honest with people that they couldn't be honest with their other friends. Which, if you think about it, is radically different from the way that they were living and the way that they were taught growing up in this world. Completely different. Right? Because the sad reality is, what are we taught when we're growing up? Right? I think when we grow up, we're taught this simple rule. If you want to make it in life, you fake it until you make it, right? Just fake it until you make it. Like, you have to pretend to be strong when you're tired and weak. You have to pretend you're good. You have to hide your flaws. You have to pretend to constantly be confident and strong. And that's the way of the world, right? The world says fake it until you make it. But if you do that, guess what? You're never going to confess your sins. You can never be real. You can never be vulnerable. And the fake you is going to be so tired, and even though inside you're dying, outwardly you may look fine, right? But when you believe in the gospel, you're supposed to experience God in a new way, that you're supposed to see yourself in a new way, right? That you are humbled, that you actually need a Savior in your life. And the gospel is supposed to allow you to open up to say, hey, these are my weaknesses. These are my struggles. These are my sins. This is what I'm going through right now, right? Hey, I'm feeling really weak right now. Right? The Gospels are supposed to enable us to live a really different life, that we don't have to fake it until we make it. Because God already knows our real us and has already loved us. And so therefore, it's supposed to create a different kind of community, right? A community that embraced you because they were embraced. A community that could be kind because they were kind too by the Lord. A community that says, hey, it's okay not to be okay. Like really, it's okay not to be okay, okay? Like really, it's okay not to be okay, okay? Okay? Yeah, even though I'm not okay, but it's okay because I'm redeemed by Jesus Christ. And that's the kind of community that we want it to be. That you can actually come to our community groups, you can actually show up to church, wherever you're at, and just to know, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay. Really, it's okay. That's all I can say, actually, right? It's okay because we're redeemed in Christ. And thirdly, we see that they were devoted to the breaking of bread and prayer. All right, once again, the is very important. Because the fact that it says the breaking of bread, it means they're not just eating together. Yeah, food is always involved, like, fellowship, there's always food. But the breaking of bread actually means they were actually celebrating the Lord's Supper. Right? That they were celebrating the Lord's Supper. So notice that they were worshiping in the temples, and they came home and they start having the breaking of bread. They were actually worshiping at home too. Right? That means they were having church service at home as well as at church. It was everywhere that they were having church service, right? So whenever Christians got together, Do you see that in the early church, whenever they get together, it was all about worshiping God? Do you see that? Right? Do you see that worshiping God wasn't meant for Sundays only, right? That's not what the early church believed. Like the early church didn't believe, hey, worshiping God is on a Sunday at 1:30 p.m., so just show up and get some donuts, right? Worshiping God for the early church was actually at home as well as in the temple courts. So they were learning, they were loving, they were worshiping together day by day, over and over and over again. And this is what made them attractive to the world. Like this is what helped them grow, okay? This is the secret here. This is what grew because they became attractive to the world. Look at verse 45. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need, and day by day attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes. They received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their numbers day by day those who were being saved. Notice that the Acts 2 church doesn't say that the church grew because they had like an awesome Dut program with a roasted pig, right? Notice that they didn't have a Easter program or a Christmas program, right? Like that's not how the early church grew. Notice that we're told that they had favor with all the people. Why? Because they were living such radically different, attractive lives. Like their lives were so attractive, so different, that's what actually drew people in. Like they were selling their possessions. They were like sharing with one another. They're hanging out all the time. They love spending time with one another. They were opening up their homes, opening up their hearts, opening up their wallets, right? They were opening up to one another, and that became so attractive that more people actually joined them, right? So in other words, Christians were people of doctrine and deed. They weren't just, hey, I just know my Bible a lot, therefore I'm a Christian, or hey, I'm just a really nice community service person, and therefore I'm a Christian, right? But you see that in the early church, they were people of doctrine and deed, that they studied together, that they learned together, but they also served together. And so when the community and when their friends and their family members, they saw that, that's when they say, hey, I kind of want in on that. That's kind of different. That's kind of unique. I want to be part of that. So here's the implication for you and I. When you become a follower of Christ, you should be ready to reevaluate everything that you used to be doing, how you used to live, how you used to do things, and you should be ready to at least embrace a new way of living that should be different from the world, right? Like we are not going to be attractive to the world if we do the exact same things as everyone else in the world. Then they might as well just join another club, right? The only reason why the Christians had power and attractiveness was because they were actually living and doing things that were actually very different from the way that the world was doing certain things. And so when you become a Christ follower, you should be open to reevaluate. Maybe it doesn't make sense to the rest of the world, but it makes sense in this community, and that's what drew people to it. Okay? Because that's what's going to help people to say, hey, you guys look so attractive because it's so different from what I'm used to. Like I'm so used to people being very, like specific about like if I'm not good enough, then I cannot, share or whatever. But you guys are just opening up and just welcoming me in, right? Like you're saying it's okay to be here. And that's what actually changed the world, right? Because your life looks so different than your friends and everyone else around you. So I want to show you a quick diagram of how a Christian's life should look like according to Acts 2, okay? There's 4 parts, okay? If you look at the early church, there's 4 things that matter to them. They had large group worship, so we see that in Acts, right? They got together in the temples and they were praising God together. So large group worship was important, right? But then they also had small group intimacy. Right? They were at homes and they were eating together. They were having Bible studies together. They were hanging out together. Okay? It's kind of like us. We have our community groups for that reason. But then they were also radically devoted to doctrine and theology. Like they really wanted to learn. Like they wanted to know the Bible. They really wanted to know, like, is this true? How come there's contradictions here? Like they really wanted to know like what the Bible was saying, what it was teaching, but they were also really committed to relationships and living it out. And the problem, right, is that I think we have lived in a consumer society where we kind of pick and choose what we want to follow, right? Like maybe you can identify. Maybe some of us here are like, you know what? I really, really like large group worship. I'll come to Sunday service because it's so good, but I'm not into small groups. Like, that's not really for me. Like, I don't want to go to small groups. Maybe some of us really love theology and Bible study. Like, I really want to learn the Bible, but then we don't want to build relationships with other people in the church. Maybe some of us love hanging out. Like, we love spending time with one another. We love doing fun things together, but I don't really want to study the Bible. I don't really, right? And the problem is when we are lopsided, right? And you weigh one more than the other, that's when you actually begin to lose a little bit of your attractiveness. Right? Like, we would never be as attractive as the early church will be. And the reason why is because the early church, they were growing in all four quadrants. Like, you notice that if you read in Acts 2 alone, all four areas were being done by the Acts 2 church. So the question is, what quadrant do you need to grow in? Like, where are you really strong at, and where can you grow in, right? Because if you're going to keep growing lopsided, you're going to become a very disfigured individual, right? And your faith is going to be lopsided. So how are we going to get a fully well-rounded faith? You need to kind of balance it out with the other components of your faith. And here's the final point, probably the most important point of the sermon. So if you guys are sleepy and you're itching for the Niners game, okay, here, this is the only point you got to pay attention to, okay? Because it's sort of like the foundation to everything that they did, okay? Because they got together for one purpose and only one purpose. This is why they got together. Christians were all about praising Jesus Christ. It was all about praising Jesus Christ. Verse 46 to 47. Day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God. Right? It was all about praising Jesus Christ. Like, praising God was the engine that spurred them on, that motivated them to get together, to learn, to worship, to praise, right? To love. Because God was so real and so important and so beautiful in their lives that whenever they got together, all they wanted to do was to give him praise. Right? That's understandable, right? Like, when you love something, think about it. When you really love something, when you truly believe that something is just so awesome and so beautiful, like, you want to share it with other people, right? Like, if you discover like an awesome Netflix show, you're like, hey, did you watch this show? It's so good, right? Or you had like an awesome piece of steak, you know, like, did you have this steak? Did you go to this restaurant? It was so good, right? Like, you want to tell, and if you don't tell people, you kind of feel like your joy and your praise gets a little bit constipated, right? You're like, oh, I want to tell people, but I can't, right? And something feels lacking, right? Or like when Messi won the World Cup, you know, when it finally happened, you know, like my Facebook and my Instagram blew up. Like, everyone was talking about it. Even non-soccer fans were talking about it. Why? Everyone was like, did you see that? Like, check it out, right? Check it out. Would you look at this? And so when Christians get together, right, when they get together, they want to proclaim the beauty of the gospel, right? Like, we get together because we want to tell people, like, hey, like, would you look at this? Do you see who God is? Do you see what he's doing? Like, why do you think we're doing Sunday service? Like, just because we have a lot of extra time, right? Like, why do you think I'm giving up my Monday nights and Friday nights and Saturday nights? Like, why do you think I'm trying to be very loud to you? And I'm doing different illustrations, and we have video sermon bumpers, and we put on lights, and it's like, why do we do all of this stuff? Right? Why do we do all this stuff? It's because we have a lot of time, and we just want to do this stuff. No, it's because I want you to desperately see the glory and the beauty of the gospel. That I want you to desperately see how good God is to you in your life, how real He is in your life, what He's been doing in your life. Like, I want you to see that so desperately. That's why we're doing all of this stuff, and that's why I'm being loud. That's why I'm even preaching, right? It's because I want you to see the beauty of the gospel. And that's why Christians get together day by day, and they want to get together. So let me end with giving you something very practical with your lives. Think about this. Why do the Niners fans get together? Right? Bless you. To talk trash about other teams and why they're more better, right? Like that's why Niners fans get together, because they think they're more awesome. Why do Republicans and Democrats get together? To affirm that they're right with each other, who's right? But the question is then, when Christians get together, it's not meant to be a social group. We just saw that, right? Like when Christians get together, we're supposed to be committed to a fellowship and praising Jesus together. So if someone comes into our church, someone comes into our community, someone comes into our fellowship and they need comfort, how are we going to comfort them as a church? We're not going to say, hey there, hey, everything's okay, don't worry about it, it's okay, you're welcomed here. No, that's not why our group exists. Instead, we say, praise the one that's broken for you, for now you may have peace. If someone amongst us comes and is just drowning in sin, like how do you confront that sin? Do you judge them and say, hey, dude, that's wrong, get out of here? No, we're supposed to say, praise the one who is broken for you, for now you are restored. How do you minister to people who are filled with guilt and past baggage amongst our group? We say, praise the one who was broken for you, who said, it is finished. That you don't have to do a single thing anymore because He's already completed everything for you. How do you minister to people who are in our group who are lonely? We say, praise the one who is broken for you, for now you have an eternal friend. How do you say to someone who's lost a loved one, lost a mom, lost a dad, lost an uncle recently? What can we say as a church? We say, praise the one who is broken for you, so that now that person is saved forever. And one day you will see him and her again. So many years ago, before Elaine and I got married, my dad, as you know, like he had a stroke, right? He actually had a stroke during Lunar New Year. So actually this past Dut was probably his maybe 12th year of getting a stroke. So we had a stroke. He was bleeding in his brain, right? And surgery was like supposed to help, but it wasn't successful. Like he was supposed to go through all this kind of surgery stuff with all the bleeding. And I remember at that time, we didn't know if he was going to make it. He was actually sent from the Alameda Hospital, and he was sent to the Eden Hospital that specializes in strokes. And I had to make the call. The doctor asked me, like, hey, his brain is bleeding. There's two options. If we don't do anything, he's probably not going to make it. If we do something, there's a chance that if it doesn't work, he might end up sort of having brain damage, right? And I had to make a decision. Do I have to make a choice to allow my dad to pass away? Or do I make a choice that in the off chance that it was unsuccessful, he might be handicapped forever? And the responsibility was on my decision. And my mom was scared, and I was scared at that time. And I remember I had made the decision for him to go through surgery. And I remember just sitting outside of the ER, and I was scared. because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was at the hospital just waiting for the results. And at that time, one of my church leaders came to the hospital. It was around like 2 a.m. And he just sat there with me. It was just me and him, empty hospital, waiting for the ER. And I didn't expect that. And he didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. So he just simply took out his Bible. He says, hey, do you want to read a Bible too? Gave me a Bible. Opened up to the book of Psalms and said, hey, let's just read together. So that's all we did. I just sat there, scared, uncertain about my dad's future, and I was just reading through the Psalms. As you know, the Psalms are songs of praise and worship, right? Poems of people expressing their hearts to God. And as I was reading through the book of Psalms with my leader, waiting for the ER, I remember that for whatever reason, that was exactly what I needed. That's exactly what I needed. Because at the time, there was nothing in this world that could have given me comfort. Nothing in this world that could have given me an answer to what I was going through. But what I needed was I needed my brothers, my Christian brothers and sisters that were so devoted to one another that they would show up at 2 a.m. to sit with me. That I needed my Christian and brothers and sisters that were so devoted to God that they said, hey, I don't know what I can really say to you. I can only give you what God's words say. And I needed at that time so desperately my Christian brother and sister to say to me, hey, praise the one who is broken, for he died, so that even if you don't see your dad anymore in this world, you may be to see him again in the next. Praise the one who was broken for you, that one day you will see him again. Praise the one who was broken for us, that one day we will be a family forever and ever and ever. Because the reality is one day that happens to all of us. And there's no answer that this world can give you that can ever speak to your deepest needs. Except for praise the one who was broken for you and I. Because now we know that the relationship that we have with one another is not just going to be 50, 60, 80 years, but forever and ever and ever and ever. Because he was broken for you. In Newark Church, this is what I long for our church. Like, this is what I need you to do for me, and I need you to do for one another as we get together. To praise the one who's broken for us so that we can be free, so that we can now live radically different lives, so that we can actually get together, learn together, worship together. And to do it day by day, be so attractive that when people look at us, they say, hey, I want to be part of that. Because what you guys are offering, what you guys are experiencing is unlike anything I could ever receive. And as more people are in awe to join us in this movement to make much of Jesus, to praise the one who was broken for us, as we continue to meet day by day, that's how the early church grew. They grew through getting together intentionally, praising the one who was broken for us, so that we may have life and life eternal forever.